How is everyone doing? Welcome back to another episode of The Banker Next Door. I am your host, Dr. Joe Berquist. Today, I wanted to talk to everybody about core providers. For anybody who doesn't know, every bank has what's known in the industry as a core system. Some of the big providers are Jack Henry, Fiserv, FIS. They're the three big boys or big players on the block, if you will. They probably have about a 70% market share of thousands of banks across the country. And I wanted to take a look here at an article, or a blog post rather, that was just in PCBB. This is part of their BID daily newsletter. And this was titled, "Core Providers Beef Up Tech, but Satisfaction Can Improve." So I want to talk a little bit about what is going on with the core providers. Are banks really happy with them? How is their service doing? So we're going to look at this article here, and then I'll finish up with kind of some comments at the end that may provide just a little bit more perspective. So let's dive into this here. So summary. So many CFIs are unsatisfied with their core providers, but few will actually switch, according to a new ABA survey, American Bankers Association. We delve into why CFIs convert cores and critical considerations before making the jump. So core banking systems have sure come a long way since they got their start in the 1960s. Basically, software made in-house by financial institutions, themselves on mainframe computers, to reduce the tedious manual process of recording transactions and maintaining bank ledgers. The software processed the transactions in batches at the end of each business day, so customers had to wait until the next day for updates on their accounts. Fast forward 6 decades, and the core ecosystem is vastly more efficient and complex, with ever-growing technologies enabling more and more services and functionality. How do banks feel about their core systems and the companies that provide them? The American Bankers Association asked its members these questions and recently released its 2024 ABA Core Platforms Survey, with nearly 800 banks responding. So core satisfaction trends. Collectively, banks are moderately satisfied overall with their core providers, with an aggregate rating of 3.19 on a scale of 5, a slight increase from 3.01 in ABA's 2022 survey. Banks' aggregate rating of their core providers' effectiveness was lower at 2.78, though it was slightly higher than the 2022 rating of 2.67. When viewing satisfaction scores individually and not in aggregate, the report's authors stress that due to the wide range of scores, even with individual providers, it's less important for the bank to find the best core than it is to find the right core for their particular strategy. Still, bank satisfaction with their core steadily dropped the longer a bank remains on their core contract term, reaching a low of only 41% within 2 years of renewal, according to the survey. At this stage, many start to consider converting to another platform from another provider. Aside from costs, respondents cite 2 main reasons for changing cores: disappointment with customer service at 42% and the relationship with their core provider at 38%. One silver lining: the top 2 reasons for considering conversions in 2022, integration support and products not being current, both fell by 10 points or more in 2024, which means that core providers evidently have been making progress on those 2 fronts. Despite flirting with conversion, only 19% of respondents said that they are likely to make the jump at their next renewal date, and 2/3 are extremely or somewhat likely to remain with their current provider. Why is that? Well, experts outside of the ABA report shed some light on this issue. There is nothing more difficult for a bank to undergo than a core vendor change. It's like open heart surgery, yes. Switching out of a core system is the most complex, difficult thing that a bank will undertake, says Charles E. Potts, Chief Innovation Officer of the Independent Community Bankers of America. This is why he thinks that just a mere 2 to 3% of FIs actually convert to another core each year. So if I could say that again, there is nothing more difficult for a bank to undergo than a core vendor change. It is literally the hardest, the most difficult thing that any bank could possibly undertake from a technology standpoint. So now If you do want to switch, what are some of the things you're going to look at? So factors to consider before switching. If your bank is considering switching core providers, there's going to be a lot of work ahead. Here are some things to consider before making the decision. Now, I'll run through these and then we'll come back to them individually. So ideal timeline, future proofing the core, making the jump to the cloud, customer service, and something that's known as sidecar cores. Let's see. And then finally, the last one is leveraging the expertise of a consultant. So now let's take a look at each one of these. So ideal timeline. Since it could take 1 to 3 years to interview and select a new core provider and then actually go through the conversion, banks should begin the process 24 to 30 months before their current contract expires, says Eric Devine, president and CEO of Vitex. Future-proofing the core. So banks need to go beyond the here and now and think of the features and functionalities that they'll need 5 or 10 years from now to be competitive. Those are important things to consider when looking to switch, says Tyler Brown, a senior research analyst with the bank consulting firm CCG Catalyst. Making the jump to the cloud. Banks need to thoroughly examine core providers' ability to move away from legacy-based systems and offer cloud-based cores that can more readily incorporate emerging technologies, said David Saylor, founder and president of Genesis Technology Group. If considering a next-gen provider, though, banks should conduct due diligence on their financial stability to make sure they'll still be around after a conversion. Customer service. Brad Smith, a partner at Cornerstone Advisors, recommends that banks ask colleagues at other banks how they feel about their core provider, and not just those who offered testimonials. Before signing any core contract, make sure there are service level protections included to maintain your leverage. Sidecar cores. Some banks that decide to stay with their existing core provider also add a sidecar core, using another core vendor to run a single operation, such as online banking or a BaaS solution, if the latter solution is more advanced. There are pros and cons to weigh, including your appetite for dealing with the idiosyncrasies of two core providers. And then finally, leveraging the expertise of a consultant. If you want to assess other core providers or even renegotiate with your current provider, you can reach out to a firm that specializes in core contract evaluation. A core contract consultant can solicit and analyze vendor RFPs, make recommendations, and negotiate with your preferred vendor. This type of service can also be available to you through the strategic relationship of a trusted partner like PCBB. While overall satisfaction has highly improved, challenges around long-term contracts, customer service, and core provider relationships remain significant. Successful core selection hinges not on finding the best provider, but the right one aligned with your bank's unique strategy. Banks should plan ahead, evaluate options carefully, and prioritize innovation to ensure long-term success. Yes. So I think a lot of great things here in this blog post. Really do a great job of summarizing a lot of the core things. But now let me go back and just talk for a minute about, so why do banks not, why do banks not change their core providers? Okay. I think there's a couple, and in spite of perhaps bad customer service, in spite of the cores not being fast when it comes to upgrading their existing technology, upgrading their existing products and their existing services. There's a couple of big things going on there. Like I said, it is the hardest thing for banks to do. You have to plan these things out many years ahead of time. The contracts are what you would call sticky, very sticky contracts. In other words, if you want to get out of that contract early, you're going to have to pay a huge penalty to do that. In the process of switching to another core, there are other, hey, you want us to prepare your data, you want us to do certain things to help you switch over. Okay, that's going to cost you. This is going to cost you. This is going to cost you. They get you coming and they get you going, as they say. And so, banks have basically put up with a lot. That being said, I think it's fair to say that a lot of core providers have kind of gotten their act together, so to speak, in the last, 10 or 15 years. A lot of them have upgraded their technology. They are constantly upgrading products and services. They are trying to find ways to make things better. one of the biggest complaints is that, if they don't offer a service, there might be another third-party vendor out there that's maybe a little newer, a little bit more cutting edge, and basically has a better product. But they need to plug in, so to speak, to the core, maybe through an API, to basically get certain data out of the core system in order for their product to work. Well, the core service providers have not always played it nicely in the sandbox, so to speak, with some of those other third-party vendors. And that has caused, issues for banks as well, because it's like, well, wait a minute. You guys don't provide the service, but if I find somebody who does, you don't want to work with them, or you don't want to play nice with them. And so again, it just caused a lot of consternation, a lot of issue for banks over the years. Like, a lot of people, you'll hear comments over the years with people saying things like, "Oh, banks are dinosaurs. Banks don't change. They don't upgrade fast enough, and they're always, they're always a few years behind, and all this kind of stuff." Well, there's a lot of reasons for that. Again, and there's a lot of complications here. Again, maybe some core provider comes in, but you also have to understand there is a managing the vendor, managing the relationship. Every bank has to comply with what's called vendor management practices. And, you have, TPS, third party service providers, you have to manage these third party relationships. And there's a lot of things you have to do as part of that. And so if you have somebody, and why am I saying that? I'm saying that because if you have somebody who's new that comes along and they don't have much of a track record, and they're like, "Oh, well, we've worked with a couple banks, and a couple banks have kind of been our guinea pig, so to speak, and they've allowed us to work with them to kind of refine our product and make it better, and now we're ready to roll it out." Well, there's a lot of banks out there that are going to basically say, "You know what, you're too new. We don't, there's not enough track record there. There's not enough there for us to basically really feel confident that you're going to be able to deliver on this product that is, that you say you can, but is going to cost a lot of money and is going to take us a lot of time to implement and train our people on." So there's, and then you got the whole concept of training too. You can never forget that, you bring a new technology in, you still got to train your people on it. You got to make sure that they know how to use the system and that they know what they're doing. And a lot of people don't like change. They spend a lot of time, they get to know intimately these core systems. They know them inside and out. So even if something doesn't work perfectly, they know how to get around it, or they know how to, "Oh, okay, well, I could do this and I could do that, and this is how I get this done." But then once you introduce the new system, you got to start all over from scratch. And there again, a lot of people are just not going to want to do that. So again, very, very interesting topic here with core providers. I thought people would find this very interesting. So a lot of good suggestions here, a lot of good survey information on how banks are feeling about their core providers right now. Not feeling too bad. Things are okay for the most part. But if you are switching or thinking about switching, definitely some things in here to consider. And like I said, we will continue this conversation. I'm sure that I will have more to talk about on core service providers in the future. But I will wrap up by saying, if you like this episode, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe, as that always helps the channel. Remember, we are on YouTube or Rumble and all major podcast platforms. Please be sure to leave your comments down below, as I love getting back to everybody. And as always, make sure to check out some of the other content on the channel. I hope everyone has a great day out there, and I will see everyone again real soon. Thanks for listening.